The world of Elden Ring is host to a myriad of strange and interesting creatures, all with their own lore and backstory. And at first glance, one of the most mundane versions of this would be the jellyfish, but that's only for players that don't discover the secret behind Aurelia. You see, Aurelia is a spirit summon we can get early on in the game at the Stormhill Shack ruins, where a woman is lying on the ground who offers you this giant jellyfish who can help you in battle. Besides the fact that the jellyfish can come in very clutch in a lot of fights with her ranged attack, the summon is actually hiding a secret sister named Arlette, who you can find near the mountaintops of the giants at the end of the game by the Stargazer ruins. If you summon Ariel next to this lost jellyfish, they will talk to one another and embrace the fact that they have been reunited after all this time and disappear into the stars. The interaction not only unlocks a handy talisman, but also is one of the most hidden and heartwarming moments in the entire game, watching two sister jellyfish reunite with one another after being years apart. Where this theory starts to take a crazy turn though, is that some players have actually found two tombstones in the mountaintop cemetery sitting right next to each other with the same names of Ariel and Arlette, belonging to two children who died early in their lives. This strongly implies that those two original spirit jellyfish are not jellyfish at all, but in fact, children who have passed away and been reincarnated as jellyfish spirits. This opens a new can of worms though, because it begs the question, are all jellyfish in Elden Ring the reincarnated souls of children? And if they are, what is going on here? Is some sort of cosmic horror happening to these children upon death? Or is there a happier tale on the innocent souls of young being spared from the life and death and instead living a peaceful existence? Throughout the lands between, we find many so-called finger maidens, who through the guidance of the two fingers, who serve the greater will, lead many great warriors and tarnish through their grace to the championing of the Elden Ring. But in the start of the game, you may have noticed a dead maiden sitting against a wall in a pool of blood in the church that we start in. We know this lady is a maiden because we are able to use her blood to soak Mog, Lord of Blood's favor in game, which is only activated with a maiden's blood, per the item description. So the question then becomes, what is this maiden doing here? And as we are reminded by multiple characters throughout the game, we are maidenless. So could this maiden potentially have been our guide that was killed right before the beginning of the game? There are endless theories as to who could have killed our maiden, including some of the demigods trying to remove your guide, or the scion just outside the church being the culprit. But for me, one of the most interesting has to be White Mask Vare, that annoying degenerate we meet when first stepping into the world. Without you even telling him, Vare is immediately aware of the fact that you have no maiden, and he makes fun of you for it, relentlessly. But even more damning, if you zoom in on his hands when we first meet him, they are covered in blood. Could it be that White Mask Vare murdered your maiden just before the game began, and now knowing where you will eventually come, is waiting for you to greet you and act as if nothing happened? The curiosity then would become his motive. After all, any good murder needs one. Well, as we know from discussions with Vare later in the game, he wants you to join the order he is a part of, the Knights of the Modwin dynasty. And in order to do that, he claims a member must kill their maiden, but that any maiden will do and suffice. So did Mare murder your maiden in order to grant himself access to this dynasty? And if he did, what other forces are at play? Could Melina somehow be involved? After all, if this was your maiden that was killed, Melina is the one who mysteriously comes to your rescue and acts as your maiden for the rest of the game. Whether or not Vare is the true killer, or if it really is your maiden, it seems to be heavily implied throughout the game that something more sinister is going on behind Melina, Vare, and the convoluted start to the game. If you haven't caught on already, FromSoft Games, and specifically Elden Ring, is full of a lot of hidden secrets. But what secret would be bigger than an entire ending that only one person has found? You see, there are 6 endings in Elden Ring, all involving different characters and events, but similar in their own way as well. However, right around the release of Elden Ring, YouTuber Garden of Eyes posted a supposed secret 7th ending to the game that players could only unlock by 100% completing absolutely everything the game had to offer. The full video was claimed to include sections of the player character meeting some of the outer gods and the greater will specifically, and merging with them, becoming an all-powerful new god. Sadly though, this video and rumor turned out to be nothing but a prank from a Dark Souls modder, but that doesn't mean they weren't onto something. Because even to this day, many fans still believe there actually is a secret hidden ending to Elden Ring, and no one has figured out how to activate it yet. One of the best features that Elden Ring has that differentiates it from other RPGs in the genre is its amazing map. Instead of being full of quest markers and big signs leading the player to exactly where they should go, it's a game of its own, where players can zoom in on interesting land masses and buildings and set forth into the world to find out what's there. Most players, though, don't know that this map actually also contains a lot of hidden messages and meanings that give insight into a lot of the lore in the game, or at least we think. You see, back when Elden Ring was in beta, there was a map that could be accessed by players that contained some Yi Chinese script that was translated by Chinese speakers in the community that revealed some very interesting things. And while the beta map never made it into the full game, we can still find similar markings all around the main Elden Ring map, signifying that the older scripts were likely canon hints. One of these in the North Sea reads, "Do not listen to the songs of the lying mermaids," when translated, and could be a nod to Greek mythology where sirens would lure sailors to their homes before killing them. Another cool find is a word just beneath a whirlpool in the Elden Ring map, which when translated to text reads, "Multiple witnesses to a sea serpent. Danger." Many of the other markings around the map give names to previously known locations, like Limgrave actually being named the Sea God Continent, and many others have to do with water and the ocean in general, signifying that it may yet play a bigger role in the world of Elden Ring, maybe a potential underwater DLC where we fight giant sea monsters? A man can dream. For FromSoft veterans, the name Patches probably brings a smile or frown to your face. He is a renowned and recurring trickster character that has appeared in every Souls-like game besides Sekiro, and in each of the games, he is known for deceiving players into their death and misfortune using the allure of a tasty treasure. He actually made his first appearance in FromSoft's Armored Core 4 Answer from 2008, and ever since they have included him in almost everything. In the Souls games, players grew a love-hate relationship for him, as he would try to trick players into dying to steal their things, but if spared, he would also later help the players and provide some of the most useful items in the entire game. In Bloodborne, he had his potentially most frightening reveal when players found Patches head stitched onto a spider that was once again used to play a prank on the player. And in Elden Ring, Patches even has his own questline which he is involved in, but sadly it's not fully complete, maybe being saved for a future DLC or sequel. But nonetheless, once again, in Elden Ring, Patches is at it again trying to trick players into their death. For most players, Patches will first be found in Murkwater Cave, where he will initially try to kill you, but upon being bested, will ask for you to spare his life. If you do, you will find him in multiple places throughout the world, including the Volcano Manor just outside the main room, and also once again playing a trick on you at Mount Gelmir. For any player that stumbled upon these weird glowing rocks near the edge of the mountain, you may have wondered what these were and if they held a secret. Well, for anyone that missed it, if you actually walk by and investigate each of these rocks by the cliff face, a cutscene will play where Patches comes up behind you and kicks you off a cliff.
Well, if you really are that gullible...
You can hate Patches, but you can't argue he's one of the most memorable FromSoft characters of all time. During your adventures gallivanting around Elden Ring, you probably at one point stumbled upon Lindell Capital soldiers mourning the loss of their fallen comrades. It's a sad sight to see and really puts into context the tragic atrocities all this fighting has caused. In a horrifying twist though, something not uncommon for Elden Ring, there's more than meets the eye here. Because if you actually manage to sneak near one of those mourning soldiers without alerting them, you can hear the sounds of crunching bones and snapping limbs, implying that these soldiers are not actually mourning their lost friends, but rather eating from their corpses as a source of food. As to why this Lovecraftian nightmarish horror is occurring, it's hard to say. It could be that the soldiers are starving or simply being controlled by a demonic entity, but either way, it's a terrifying realization that many players probably missed. While it's still not clear what the Greater Will's real intentions were with coming to the Lands Between originally, our best guess is that it had something to do with the great and ancient tree known as the Primordial Crucible. The Crucible was the birthplace of all life on the planet and holds immense and unknown powers that a god like the Greater Will would certainly be keen on harnessing. So when the Elden Beast was first sent to the Lands Between, one of the original things that presumably happened was the power of this long-lost great tree began to be harnessed. And in the process, the Erdtree we know and see in the game was born, with its giant yellow rays of light signifying the Golden Order. It would then follow that the Erdtree itself is not some sort of new entity or being, but rather a parasite that has taken over the host body of an ancient being and commandeered its power for its own doing. This leads to a lot of interesting lore implications as to what the Erdtree actually really even is, and what significance it holds. As we know, other great trees, like Miquella's Halig tree, have grown in competition to this new alien force, trying to bring back the ways of the primordial crucible. Could it even be possible that the Halig tree is the true reincarnation of the primordial crucible itself, fighting its way back into life in opposition to the parasitic Erdtree? The answers still remain unclear, but either way, these great trees are very likely the thing that makes this planet so special in the first place, and why so many outer gods and gods alike have shown a huge interest in something that lies here. The planet itself is hiding a massive secret brought to fruition from these giant trees, and only in time will the Greater Will or some other powerful force finally unhatch their secrets. One of the coolest weapons in the entirety of Elden Ring has to be the Sacred Relic Sword. But the most interesting part about the entire sword might not even be its awesome look or amazing special attack, but rather the item description. Sword wrought from the remains of a god who should have lived a life eternal. Thoughts on what the weapon portends are many and varied. Some consider it the mark of a great sin, or sign of great devastation. Some think of it as the end of an age, while others the beginning. When we take into consideration that the same sword also looks almost identical to the coiled sword from the Gundyr boss in Dark Souls 3, something pointed out by YouTuber NDMyOnTV, it starts to paint the picture that Elden Ring may actually be the start of something much bigger than itself. As marked in the description, the sword marks the end or beginning of an age, and as the sword is donned from the final boss of Elden Ring, it's a fitting description indeed. But the horrifying realization is that this new age could actually be different from Software games. You see, besides the fact that we do see some reoccurring characters like Patches in all of the FromSoft games, and the fact that at one point in an interview George R.R. Martin, who helped write Elden Ring, mentioned that the game was a sequel to Dark Souls, it seems that multiple endings from Elden Ring could actually be the start to other games from the FromSoft catalog. For example, the Frenzied Flame ending of Elden Ring could be the catalyst that thrust the world into chaos in Dark Souls, and would explain how the light of the bonfires was born. For Bloodborne, the Lovecraftian nightmare would have been born from the Age of Stars ending, or Ranni's ending, where she defeats the Golden Order and births the world anew. And to top this out, Demon Souls could be the spawn from the Destined Death ending. All of these theories would make so much sense and would tie everything together, as to reasons we see certain characters like Patches in all of the games, because he stems from the original story, the story of Elden Ring, and only through different endings that the player chooses does the world cascade itself into the stories we know and love, like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and Bloodborne. In fact, maybe that hidden 7th ending to the game is actually real, and is the prequel to the Armored Core franchise. I swear I'm not high. It's a super interesting idea to think about nonetheless, and makes the dark and twisted lore of all of these series that much more interesting. For any new Souls players in the series, finding hidden messages from other players throughout the world would have started as a relief, until you realized in many cases these messages left by other players were pranks more often than not. Many times asking players to jump, roll, hit, and do other things that would result in their death, or even worse, them feeling stupid. Also, the community can get a good laugh. But sometimes messages like this can result in finding hidden rooms and treasure, and because of the propensity of FromSoft to include hidden mechanics like this in their games, some players try anything to find new locations. This was taken to a whole new level though, when it was discovered that there is a wall in Volcano Manor that if hit 50 times consecutively would suddenly disappear, letting players into a room they would already have had access to from another door just on the left. But it still sent the community into an absolute frenzy. After all, now there was definitive proof that these ultra-secret doors did in fact exist in-game. To this day, many players are still hitting walls all across the Lands Between in an attempt to find the next big hidden secret. And knowing FromSoft, there might just be some massive discoveries yet to be made. It's one of the most fun parts of FromSoft games that really lends to a strong sense of community as the player base bands together to find these new discoveries, and I really wish more games had things like this. In many ways, the lands of Elden Ring are nothing more than a resource-rich canvas from which the outer gods are trying to extract essence or power. The formless mother craves wounds and flesh rife with blood. Tainted with her kiss is a poisonous and deadly disease. The god of rot has infected Mikola of the Erdtree and caused a rot of death to sweep over the lands, killing anything in its path. The Lord of the Frenzied Flame wants to burn everything on the entire planet and engulf it in a world of flames, all to bring us together as one. And the Greater Will, through its very parasitic nature, has likely transformed great relics of the past like the Crucible into the beacons of the Golden Order like the Erdtree. We can see this in places like underground tunnels and caverns throughout the game, where many giant tree roots, presumably from the massive Erdtree above, have found their way deep underground with many bodies and souls found dead in their branches, as the tree itself is feeding off all life on the planet. Where this theory gets really crazy though, is when we start to realize that everything surrounding the Great Will specifically has something to do with mushrooms or fungi. You see, in real life, many people don't know this, but mushrooms and trees often communicate through the tree roots underground, which send signals between trees and the mushrooms themselves, telling each other of upcoming danger and other information. But you may be wondering where in Elden Ring's case this applies. Well, if you take a look at the two fingers, you may have noticed they have a fleshy exterior, but the dead ones we find near runes actually seem to be made of wood? Why would this be the case? And on top of this, one uncommon form of mushroom called a dead man's finger fungus looks exactly like the two fingers in-game. Is this the inspiration that FromSoft had when they were designing the two fingers? It certainly seems like it. The reason this is so significant though, is it would perfectly tie into the idea that the Greater Will is a parasite in the world, harnessing everything in its path of its essence. So it could be that through the use of the great trees that have giant roots underground, they communicate with mushrooms, or in our case, the two fingers, to spread their influence. The reason this is so significant though, is it would perfectly tie into the idea of the Greater Will being a parasite in the world, harnessing it for its essence. Through the use of the great trees and through giant roots underground, it communicates with other mushroom beings, or in our case, the two fingers, which are used to spread influence. But it only gets more wild from here, because for those of you that didn't know as well, mushrooms can actually survive in space, which would perfectly fit into the lore of the Greater Will sending a comet hurling through space holding the Elden Beast, as this comet could also have contained the fungi materials that would start to envelop the lands between. Could it be that the Greater Will is really an alien fungi that has come to the land to strip it of all its resources and power? As someone that personally loves sci-fi even more than fantasy, the idea that an ancient and godlike alien race of parasitic fungi have taken over a planet to harness a long-lost secret power sounds amazing, and there actually is a ton of evidence to support this theory potentially having some validity. For example, this would also perfectly explain why Marika shattering the Elden Ring was so bad for the Greater Will, as the death root plague that began to spread from Godwyn's decaying body would have infected and killed nearby fungus and trees as we see in the game. And to tie this all together, we know that the Erdtree roots deep underground are digesting the bodies of dead and fallen soldiers and beasts, which is exactly what fungi does in our real world, especially during the Carboniferous period, where it broke down bacteria that developed enzymes to spawn the foundation blocks of our very world. We know that mushrooms recycle dead material into fertilizer, which helps establish growth long-term on planets, and we know that the Erdtree is most likely the evolved form of the Crucible, which by definition is a situation of severe trial, or in which different elements interact, leading to the creation of something new. This perfectly explains the story of Elden Ring and ties together so many of the core themes, characters, and events that it's almost a disservice to yourself to not at least humor this awesome theory in some way. During your adventures gallivanting around Elden Ring, you probably at one point stumbled upon Lindell Capital soldiers mourning the loss of their fallen comrades. It's a sad sight to see and really puts into context the tragic atrocities all this fighting has caused. In a horrifying twist though, something not uncommon for Elden Ring, there's more than meets the eye here. Because if you actually manage to sneak near one of those mourning soldiers without alerting them, you can hear the sounds of crunching bones and snapping limbs, implying that these soldiers are not actually mourning their lost friends, but rather eating from their corpses as a source of food. As to why this Lovecraftian nightmarish horror is occurring, it's hard to say. It could be that the soldiers are starving or simply being controlled by a demonic entity, but either way, it's a terrifying realization that many players probably missed.